We now know that poverty also triggers some depressing long-term changes in your brain. When you're poor, the limbic system, part of the brain responsible for behavioral and emotional responses, is constantly sending fear and stress signals to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's been receiving a lot of attention in feel good pop psychology for being the final part of the brain to mature and not doing so until you're almost 30 years old. There are lots of implications of this that are simultaneously related to and beyond the scope of this video. But the biggest one got my cousin released after a prison sentence of 33 years. He served for a life sentence or is part of a life sentence for murder. Leave me a comment if you want me to make a video about how my feelings on this go back and forth, because I think the justice system got it both wrong and right at the same time. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for decision making and planning. The constant stress of poverty causes it to shrink slightly, making a person less able to solve problems, set goals, and complete tasks most efficiently. And I take it that you already see where this is going. But in case you haven't, here's some more data for you. A set of experiments conducted by Andrew Shaw, an assistant professor at the University of Chicago Business School, demonstrated how this effect can have an outcome. Shaw studied the impacts of scarcity on decision making by using a series of games in which participants were paid based on their performance. In each study, some participants received abundant resources to play the game, while others received limited resources. In some studies, players could borrow extra resources at an interest rate. Shaw found that the games took on greater urgency for people with fewer resources. These participants became more focused on the task at hand and made the best use of their scarce resources, but this added focus came at a price, including mental fatigue, costly borrowing decisions, and overall poorer performance than their richer counterparts. Shaw examined how financial scarcity influenced people's decision-making and performance in games throughout the experimental design like this. For example, in a game where the goal was to knock down targets, players with only 3 shots per round spent more time aiming than those with 15 shots. This improved their performance but had downsides. When given the chance to borrow extra shots by giving up shots in the later rounds, those with fewer shots made counterproductive borrowing decisions that hurt overall performance. While these experimental games are not the same as real-life poverty, they capture the main problem of growing up and being poor. Decisions considered routine by the affluent can take on much greater urgency for the poor. This added urgency can lead to poor choices in other matters by monopolizing attention and draining cognitive resources. It's not that people with money make many more good financial decisions than poor people. In fact, the research suggests that poverty forces you to make more efficient use of your resources, which can, in the short term, lead to higher decision quality. The problem is that when poor people make the wrong decision, they suffer greater consequences. When I was in my early 20s, a few years after I squandered the life insurance and Social Security windfall in a way that only a poor person could, I got caught up in the insidious cycle of payday loans. These are loans where the only requirement is a job that can be verified. These are great in a pinch when facing a surprise, unexpected expense. But the interest rates are exorbitant. I had more than a few loans with a greater than 20% interest rate. The type of person who needs a $500 payday loan to cover a sudden emergency doesn't have $600 to pay back. I was that type of person, so I did the most obvious thing when it came to paying them back. I took out another payday loan to help me when I fell behind on the first. And when I fell behind on that one, I took out another one. This vicious cycle continued until I closed the bank account the companies were taking their payments from and heavily screened my phone calls over the next few years as I paid them back on my own time. Fortunately, the barely legal nature of these companies makes it so they can't report a delinquency to credit bureaus. This seems fitting as these places disproportionately target low-income populations. I always tell you that you're in a low-income area if you see a liquor store, pawn shop, and a payday loan building all next to each other. Shaw observed this type of counterproductive borrowing decision in the experiments. When you're poor, survival is the highest priority. You either make decisions that ignore the long term so you can make it to payday, Our survival mode shuts down your ability to intelligently handle immediate problems. All of this research explains why we make these short-sighted decisions while under the duress of poverty. And people are quick to look at research like this and propose a simple solution. Give people money so they stop feeling the stress of scarcity, and with a little financial education, we can eradicate poverty. However, if this were true, then how do we explain the lottery winners and professional athletes and musicians who go broke after the immense wealth they had? And how do we explain what I did with my $55,000 life insurance money? Scarcity mindset doesn't instantly change if you become suddenly flush with cash. If your brain has been dealing with the stress of being poor for decades, the damage your prefrontal cortex took doesn't just undo itself any faster than your body drops all the fat you put on because you ate an apple instead of cookies and went for a run one day. The longer you're poor, the worse you'll be with money if you ever make it. And this has also been proven. By analyzing the tax returns covering the U.S. population from 1996 to 2012, and then evaluating the tax returns of their children, it was found that the more money your parents made, the more likely you were to be employed at age 30 and the higher your income would be. While I think it is notable, or what I think is notable about this relationship, is that they evaluated the children at age 30. At that age, this means that whatever the economic status you had as a child is still the economic status you've had for 60%, the majority of your life. Given that poverty changes your brain and the longer you're poor, the more extensive those changes are, it's no wonder the children of the poor are more likely to repeat the same habits as their parents.